Series of security threats in airlines, 12 security threats to the airlines in India in just the last 3 days. After security scare to Akasa and Air India, IndiGo Mumbai-Delhi flight has been diverted. All bomb calls were made to be found hoax. Well, clearly here, these repeated instances leading to concerns and questions on how there isn't a crackdown on these hoax calls. Time and again, these cases that are coming to light, often turning out to be hoax. In fact, always, at least so far, the threats that have come in have been proven to be hoax. But what action has been taken against these people? It's shocking, and the kind of losses that airlines face due to this security scare every time. 12 security threats that airlines have received in just the last 3 days. Well, this comes right a day after multiple threats that Air India received. We're looking at now Akasa and IndiGo. Both have received threats. IndiGo Mumbai flight was even diverted to Ahmedabad. All these bomb calls were finally found to be a hoax. Let me cut across to Sanjay Lazar, aviation expert, joining us for a little more clarity on this. Sanjay, the threat mails, threat calls that airlines have received, of course, they've got to take strict action and ensure their passengers are safe. That's their priority, and that's what they've done every time. Moved the flight to an emergency landing and deboarded passengers, checked, and then got them back again to continue with their journey. This kind of reworking every time that this happens, the losses that aviation or an airline faces, do give us the magnitude and the intensity of damage a hoax call like this can cause.
Hi, thanks for having me. First of all, it's condemnable, the amount of these bomb scares that we're getting. We've had, I think, 10 in the last 2 days and 5 today, so that's about 15. I don't think we've had that for the previous 6 months. So I also look at the connections to the other terrorist organizations that we've been dealing with in the last week. The country has been dealing with. Secondly, this is an inevitability of aviation. The moment an airline or a government or an agency gets a bomb threat or a terrorist threat, you have to divert and land, and it's obviously going to cost you in terms of fuel, in terms of landing, in terms of delays. Very often, like we've seen in the Chicago flight where they landed in Canada, you have to put up passengers sometimes. There's huge costs. And the costs involve landing charges, they involve fuel, they involve hotels. But that is not the only cost. The cost is the human capital. There is stress on passengers, there is tension. There's also the worry of whether or not there is a device on board, and our regulations by the DGCA and the government make it clear that you have to do a clean sweep of the aircraft when such a bomb threat comes up. You cannot take any chance. The pilot in command and the airline do not take any chances, and it is the correct thing to do. My suggestion, and sorry.
No, just my question here. Well, we know that this is a protocol that the airlines have to thoroughly check and sanitize the aircraft before ensuring that they continue with their journey. But the number of calls that have come in the past, these hoax calls, we've hardly ever seen anyone implicated for it or a conviction. There's really no deterrent. This seems to be a more common affair.
Well, there is a deterrent in the law that you can be treated as for terrorism activities and imprisoned up to 7 years. But the problem is that, is there any detection? All these calls seem to be coming into some numbers or to some, emails are coming. Are the government agencies tracking them down? Are they able to track them down? Because you can't expect airlines to have such sophisticated tracking equipment where they, cybercrime tracking. I think the government needs to chip in with its IT department and help airlines or set up, inbound numbers on which they receive where they can track it. We've already seen that, through social media, courts and the police have tracked down Twitter users, Facebook users, even anonymous mails and stuff like that. So I think we need to sharpen that aspect and of course, surveillance. Pre-departure surveillance needs to be much more stronger so that you're confident that the aircraft is sanitized before you depart.
It's really shocking, Sanjay Lazar, because hoax bomb threats in India is really not uncommon. This has been on, and it constantly comes in. It disturbs the atmosphere. There's so much panic and worry. At this point, what would be your advice, maybe, to the authorities who are overseeing this? You did mention on detection and how that should be necessary, but somewhere where we could be lagging in controlling this menace.
Well, I did post a couple of days ago when the Indo-Canadian diplomacy war broke out that, immediately we should have tightened security at all airports for all flights. Airlines must be ready to advance additional security checks because don't forget the worst terrorist bombing we've ever had came from there. And, people have forgotten that yesterday was the anniversary of the death of Talvinder Singh Parmar. So that's, there's a lot of scope of linkage there. You need to start checking aircraft, cleansing aircraft. We need to have a way of monitoring inbound phone calls to airlines and airports, through cybersecurity, like I said, by the government authorities, which I think is not in place at the moment. These are the only two things. Other than that, I can tell, passengers to please bear with the burdens you're facing and the stresses, because this seems like it's not ending anytime soon unless we catch a few of these guys and make an example of these hoax callers. But it's shattering for, somebody. I got calls from people who were stranded overseas because of this. They're scared, and it's sad. I just hope we get a handle on this.
Has there been any instance, Sanjay Lazar, of a man or a woman who's been pulled up, has been caught for making a hoax call like this? We heard there's some reports doing the rounds that one college student was caught just a few days ago for making a hoax call. But otherwise, just to make that person a poster so that and the action taken against that person should be a deterrent for people wanting to do this. Because you are looking at threats coming up on X platforms, on Facebook, on Instagram, threats coming on social media, which is taken into account by the agencies, and then this whole way to ensure safety for passengers.
I'll answer this in the reverse. Our threats on X, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram can be tracked within minutes. The government just has to, because there are already High Court orders, Delhi High Court orders in place, they are bound to give up the IP address and the owner and the user, even if it's a fake user. You will get to them because they have to have a verified email or a phone number. So that's trackable. So that's one thing. The second, whether it's overseas or in India, you can track it. Number two, examples. There have been quite a few examples of people with hoax calls. I don't know if you remember the young Gujarati student out of Liverpool who was traveling to Spain with his friends and casually remarked about, they were on a WhatsApp chat, private school WhatsApp chat group, who said they wanted to bomb the aircraft, and they boarded the aircraft. Before they crossed into Germany, on the way to Spain, they were escorted by Air Force jets, fighter jets. They were brought down. He was tried and paid a huge penalty and was supposed to go for imprisonment. I know they appealed. So it's not unheard of that there are tracking technologies for phones within airports, outside, or calls being made to airports that exist in other countries. And I know India has that capability. We need to start doing that. There have been a few cases in India as well who've been tracked down. There was the famous guy in Jet Airways case where the person was, made a bomb hoax call because his girlfriend was flying out, and he got caught. He's a Gujarati gentleman again. He's in prison. There are a couple of cases in India.
Imprisonment, not just imprisonment. Sanjay Lazar, we heard the Air India. In fact, the airline has issued a statement saying that we want to take strict legal action and ensure that person is also legally liable to bear all the expenses and the losses that the airline has faced.
Absolutely, they must. And Air India is right. Air India must, if they get hold of these people, they must make them pay all the costs. Imagine the cost of diverting a 777 bound for Chicago to, Inuit, which is almost in Iceland, in the northern part of Canada, and then getting all the passengers. Of course, they came on the Canadian Air Force aircraft, but huge costs involved, huge costs. And runs into lakhs. It's not, in thousands, it's lakhs and lakhs of rupees. So I would hope that somebody is tracked and somebody is held to, account on this.
Sanjay Lazar, I really appreciate your time for joining us. I'm going to quickly bring in Shiv Arur, my colleague joining us live from the newsroom. Shiv, we understand that Indian airports largely do have a bomb assessment committee where they assess the gravity of these threats. But yet, it can't be taken lightly, even if it's a post on X or on Facebook, a threat that says there's a bomb in the flight and this is a flight they're talking about. There seems to be a whole turnaround in the schedule with the airlines ensuring passenger safety, landing it in an emergency landing area, and then the whole process. We're looking at 3 days, 12 threats that have come to Indian Airlines.
Nabila, I want to start by saying that Sanjay Lazar, who you were just speaking to, happens to be a person who actually lost family members in the 1985 Kanishka bombing by Canadian Khalistani terrorists. So he knows a thing or two about actual bomb scares. He became an aviation expert after that tragedy and losing members of his family in that bombing. So his words carry a lot of weight. You're absolutely right. The scary thing about reporting on 12 bomb scares, all of which have turned out to be hoaxes in just the last 3 days, is basically a reminder that airlines are in many ways simply sitting ducks. They have no choice, no matter how small or unspecific the threat. It can be a little tweet, it can be an email containing the airline, the flight number, and an ambiguous kind of threat. And airlines, ground control, pilots have no choice whatsoever. There is a laid down protocol that they have to follow. If they're in the air, they need to turn back and divert to the nearest airport. Safety of passengers, safety of the aircraft is the absolute priority. There is a flowchart and a decision-making system which has been in force for years. Like Sanjay said, and I agree, deterrence and acting upon those mischievously trying to disrupt airlines in this manner is of prime importance. Very few people have actually been arrested in this manner, over the last few years. But a fact that we're seeing 12 different bomb hoax threats of this kind targeting Indian airline carriers in just the last 3 days shows obviously this is organized. Someone's trying to disrupt it. And remember, this is way beyond just mischief. Each and every bomb hoax that forces a flight to divert or land or turn back to its, the source airport costs a huge amount of money. Tens of lakhs of rupees are wasted by airlines. And remember, post-COVID, civil aviation has already been under huge pressure. Most airlines already run under, bleeding losses, Nabila, as you know. And therefore, it's extremely difficult. Each and every flight that gets disrupted in this manner is actually an attack on not just on passengers, but on the airlines, their ability to survive. It's an attack on infrastructure. It's an attack on freedom to travel. And it's an attack on the Indian economy. So it's an all-round, very, very dangerous thing that's going on right now.
It's still shocking, though, Shiv, that there isn't a sophisticated enough system to really detect these threats. And as Sanjay also mentioned, if these are threats coming in on X platform, within minutes it could be tracked. The IP address could be tracked. How is that? That hasn't happened in a manner that we expect it to happen. If it happens, one threat should be enough for the entire system to be activated. Here we're looking at 12 threats in 3 days.
That's a good question. The only problem is, Nabila, that's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even though there should be systems in place, perhaps, employing AI and other methods to look for keywords, and look for this kind of thing. It's sometimes very difficult for it to actually happen. Also remember that when someone, is putting out a bomb hoax, they're actually trying for it to be seen. Sometimes the loop, the time it takes to track, first detect, identify that this is an actual threat and not something else, whose account this is, IP tracking, etc., usually happens at a time when the aircraft is already in the air. And that's actually the clincher. It's not happening before the flight or after the flight. It's happening usually just before the aircraft takes off or when the aircraft is already in the air, at which point there is no choice. There is an non-negotiable standard operating procedure for airlines and aircraft that they've got to turn back, and that's where the loss actually happens. The investigation will happen after the aircraft comes into land. It's not as if, let the aircraft be in the air, we'll do our checks on the ground and then update the pilot.
There are different teams to get into the bottom of the perpetrator and where that threat mail is coming from. We're just hoping that this really ramps up that infrastructure, Shiv, that these threats that are flowing in must be stopped. There must be a deterrent in place. There should be a warning. Thank you very much for joining us.